So I'd like for you to start by telling us a little bit about how you got involved in JMC education.
Well, I think it goes back to high school, actually. We didn't have a student newspaper in high school, so some of us were selected to write stories for the local newspaper, which was a weekly. And I was one of those people who was selected. And so in my junior year of high school, I started writing for a real newspaper, actually. And that's how it started. And when I went to college, I majored in journalism as well as English, and was the senior editor of our college newspaper. And then when I graduated, I started teaching high school journalism and started a newspaper at a new high school in Brick Township, New Jersey. And then I started a student newspaper at a new community college in New Jersey, at Ocean County College in Toms River, New Jersey. And then when I moved to Florida, I came here for a position at Miami-Dade Community College in teaching journalism again. And but I guess the most fortunate thing for me was when FIU opened in 1972. I sent over my resume, and they saw that I had all this journalism experience from teaching journalism on many levels, and decided that I would make a good director of student activities for FIU. So I was FIU's first director of student activities, and part of my job was to start a student newspaper for FIU. And so that's kind of how it began. We didn't have a journalism program here at FIU at the time, a major or anything like that. And so I started offering a course, sort of like a practicum course for the students who were working on the newspaper. And then we started a yearbook as well, and I advised that. And so eventually we talked about having a few communications classes, and eventually the university decided it would have a department of communication, and I taught a few of those classes, but I was still in administration here. At that point in time, I was assistant to the vice president of student affairs. Then the position opened up of director of public relations for the university, and so I moved over to that position, still working with students here on the student newspaper, and getting them going in it, and moving along with having a course here and there that was being taught as part of an overall journalism curriculum. And then finally, we actually formalized a department of communication here at FIU, and the provost just said to me that he thought I should move over, and I became the acting chair of that department, and the rest is kind of history. So it was kind of a long road to where I am now, but I've been here at FIU for 42 years, and it's been a wonderful journey, a great adventure, having the opportunity to build programs here at this university and be one of the founders of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication.
Well, you have really done a lot in the field, and you've done it at all levels. You started out with high school students, community college students, both up in New Jersey, and then coming down to Florida. And so as you worked preparing students, you had them on a newspaper, a yearbook, you saw them going out into careers in media. I'm sure that you saw that there were going to be challenges for them to face in the future. And what kind of things did you see and feel that they would face in terms of their skill level, or certainly a diverse group of students that you had both in New Jersey and in the Miami area, or the evolution of technology? As we think back now, you've been here 44 years?
Close to that.
Almost. What was it like getting those students ready, and what did you have to worry about in terms of preparing them?
Well, I think here at FIU, two things that actually you mentioned. Let's take technology first. When we first started the program, we had typewriters. And we had labs with typewriters in them, and we were always worrying about the typewriters, the keys would get stuck and everything. And then if we look at things today, my God, the multimedia that students are doing is just phenomenal. Who would have thought all those years ago. We founded the program in 1980, so who would have thought all of those years ago that we would evolve into something like this with technology today? And where the students, in many instances, know more than the faculty know, because they've grown up from very, very young ages with technology. It's something that's second nature to them. So that evolution has been pretty phenomenal. But the other element is one of diversity, and South Florida is such a diverse place to be. It's a wonderful place to live for that reason. There's just so much happening here, and there's so many different kinds of people here. And FIU, of course, we're a community university, so we're kind of the harbinger of what's happening across the United States with more and more minority students. We are a minority university. I'll just talk about the School of Journalism. We are 82% minority in the School of Journalism. 71% of that is Hispanic. And so having that kind of an influence where English is a second language for many of these students, and for many of them, the language skills of a communications program were pretty difficult. So we have seen the evolution of a language skills program here in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication because of the fact that the students really needed to be better in their skills in order to go out into the workforce. And now I think we have one of the best levels of training and language skills of many universities across this country, just because we've concentrated on it because of the diversity of our student body.
Let me just stop you there. What were some of those things that you did to help the students better prepare?
Well, early on we developed a language skills test, which the students would have to take as a gatekeeper to get into the school, because you have to have skills in order to be able to write and to go out and get a job, no matter what field you're going into in the field of communications. That skills test evolved over decades to a computerized test, which we have today. But we also found that even taking the test, some of the students were getting very, very low scores in the test, and they needed help. So we developed a grammar slammer for a course, and we have a grammar workshop now. It's actually for 3 credits that we offer. And there are people actually from outside the School of Journalism who want to take it because they know their language skills are not that good and they want to improve. So and it's not remedial really. What it is it just tries to get them up to speed so that they become better communicators. But we find that our students, when they go out, their employers say they're really great. They know what they're doing. Their language skills are better than an awful lot of people with whom they work. So we've concentrated on trying to get them to that level. As I said earlier, I think that our university and South Florida is a microcosm of what's happening across the United States with diversity. You know, it happened here first. But so we've learned a lot from that in trying to get more Hispanics particularly into the workplace, into communications. And through the center, the Lillian Kopenhaver Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication, since 73% of our students are women, we have tried to particularly look at minority women moving up into leadership skills with regard to the communications areas. So that's kind of some of the training we've tried to provide here at FIU.
In terms of other courses that are offered in the curriculum at FIU in terms of reporting and dealing with diverse communities, did you have that when the program started, or did you see more and more effort being placed as your program evolved of better preparing students for a diverse workforce? I know Miami, as you say, is a major multicultural community. It's almost second nature as people
Yeah, you know,
rise.
I think it was second nature to us even in the beginning because almost, well, as I said, we started as a department in 1980. Almost maybe 1982, 83, we developed a course called Reporting in a Multi-Ethnic Community. Now that goes back how many years? Decades. I think we were the first ones in the country to have that kind of a course just because that's where our students were going to work, was in a multi-ethnic community. It started out as a 1-credit course because we weren't sure about it. And you know, going back many decades, there were still a lot of questions. But eventually it worked into being a 3-credit class and one that became required after a while for all the students to take. But then that sort of worked into the other reporting classes that we have, so that the students in a number of our classes will go out into the community and cover the different communities and actually do blogs and do videos and other kinds of things that have been developed within certain communities in Little Havana, in Little Haiti, in various places like that, in Overtown, to look at the nature of the communities that are within the greater Miami community. So it's really been part of what we've done all along, just because of who we are.
Mm-hmm. So you've been a trailblazer both on this campus, but also nationally and internationally with your work in AEJMC. Certainly back in 1999, women had not had a long history of being leaders in the association. What kind of challenges did you face, or tell us a little bit about your experience with AEJMC.
Well, my first AEJ convention was in 1968, and this is when we still met on college campuses. So we were at the University of Kansas, and we had our opening night reception. We always have an opening night reception. Our opening night reception was in a barn, and they had hay bales and all kinds of things all over the place. And so when I walked in, and I was teaching at a community college at the time in New Jersey, when I walked in, I looked around and it was all white males. And I was one of the very few women there, first of all. And secondly, one of the younger people who were there at that time. So it was very, very different, because it was AEJMC really started out, and journalism education started out being basically a bastion for males, because journalism was male-oriented, and most of the communications professions were. They were male-oriented, and so I looked around and it was like, wow, I am sort of, a fish out of water here. So over the years, one of the things I tried to do through being I've been very involved in the organization from the very beginning, doing all kinds of things, heading up, I was chair of the newspaper division, chair of the Council of Affiliates, chair of the Advisory Council, or the Council of Divisions today, on the executive committee several times. So always tried to develop programs that would help women. I've always been part of the Commission on the Status of Women almost since the very first day it started. I was part of that. And I also started the Junior College Journalism Association, which now is the Community College Journalism Association. I was one of the founders of that organization. We tried to get more women into two-year college teaching initially before I joined the university. But through all of that, we tried to diversify what was happening in the organization and to bring more women in, and to bring more women into leadership. And that has happened over the years, and we've had many women now in succession as presidents of the organization, and very involved in the divisions and in the leadership of the organization. So it's become a much more diverse organization, one that really models what our students are, because really in almost all the journalism schools in this country, women predominate in the field. And that's, it's a natural thing, because women were really not thought of as being journalists or communicators in any manner all along, because if you look historically back with regard to women in their roles, it was always, even in the colonial days, women were involved in communications because their husbands were. And so maybe a husband died in the war, and so the woman took over the newspaper or something, or was a printer along those lines. So it was only by way of husbands or brothers, Benjamin Franklin's sister, that women got involved in the field. So when we had our early days of newspapers and communications in this country, it was male-oriented, and so women didn't think about going into the field. They go to college, but they didn't think about going into journalism or public relations or advertising, but they went into other fields. So now women do think about going into the field. So we have a predominance of women going into the pipeline now, but so many of them are still in entry-level or lower management positions, and getting them up into management and leadership positions, there's still a glass ceiling out there.
And you've picked up your passion for creating women leaders has evolved through each phase of your career. And it's culminated now, I think, with the Lillian Kopenhaver Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication here at Florida International. But you've continued using the center to help AEJMC too, because you've drawn young faculty. You've had workshops as part of the AEJMC conventions. Talk a little bit about how the center evolved and what you hope its legacy will be.
Well, as I was Dean of the School of Journalism up until the end of 2011, the School of Journalism and Mass Communication here at FIU. And I started thinking about what did I want to have as a legacy. Of course, one of my legacies is being one of the founders of the university, number one, and secondly, of the School of Journalism. But I wanted something tangible that I could give back and I could help. And I kept thinking about all the instances in which I was the first woman to do something. And I thought, well, you know, it's really sad that I was the first woman to do so many of these things, that there weren't other women there at the time. And so I conceived of the idea of the center so that we could help other women, young women, look toward becoming leaders in the field, and no matter what field they're going into in the communications industries, as well as in the academic world. So that's how we started the center, and we actually started our activities in May of 2013. It's actually when we started operations here with our first webinar. And our first webinar speaker was Mindy Marquez. Mindy is executive editor of the Miami Herald and the first Hispanic woman to head up a major metropolitan daily in the United States. She's a trailblazer, and she's a really good role model for us to kick off the work of our center. The center is designed, and our mission is to train the women leaders of tomorrow in the fields of communication, to give them encouragement and empowerment to look ahead so that they can get ahead and realize their dreams that they shouldn't think about not being able to achieve. And we also wanted to do it on the academic side. So this summer will be our 4th annual pre-convention workshop for young academics. These are tenure-earning young faculty, women faculty at colleges and universities across the country who are looking to move into leadership roles, maybe department chairs, and also getting tenure and promotion. For the past 3 cohorts, we are now at 65 of what we're calling the Kopenhaver Center Fellows. And we keep in touch with them. We have a cohort of around 20 every summer. We do 4 hours of training for them. We bring in women leaders in our field of communications education who talk to them. We do roundtables with them. We bring in senior professors. We do a panel discussion to talk about the different issues that they'll be facing. And it's really an open session. It's been really vigorous the times we've done it. And the young women who have been part of it they are getting ahead. You know, they're doing things. I get little notes from them. I just published my first book, or I'm now a department chair. And we keep in touch with them because we have a reunion of them every year so that we can see what they're doing and so we can track them. They go on our mailing lists for all of our webinars and our seminars that we do at the Kopenhaver Center. We have a research forum where we try to link up faculty from across the country who might want to work on research studies together that deal with the field of women in communication. So on both the professional side as well as the academic side, and we co-sponsor the workshop with the Commission on the Status of Women at the convention every year. And then this coming year, we're doing a panel discussion with the Commission on, we're calling it Equity and Equality. When will women get there? And one of the things that we're doing through the Kopenhaver Center is a national survey of women, of everybody in all of the professions. We're looking at advertising, public relations, digital and online, newspapers, magazines, and broadcast, looking at professionals in all of those organizations. And through the professional organizations that serve those people, we have a survey that we're administering on the role and the status of women in all of those industries. We're doing all of the industries at the same time, asking them all the same questions, so we can compare and contrast and look at where women are in the industries. And the results of those survey, we're doing the survey, actually the survey is going out, we hope, in the next week. And by the spring, we will have the data analyzed, and we will present that information at the AEJ convention next fall. We think it'll be a lively discussion. So we've had, so many connections through the center with AEJMC. And 2 years ago, I started with the commission an award for a Young Scholar Award, Outstanding Young Scholar Award. And we had 26 applicants and nominations for the award last year. We give out a $250 check and a plaque to the winner because we want to encourage young women to do research and to particularly do research on women in communication, but also to do research, become researchers so they can move up in the academic world. So we have a lot of synergies between AEJMC and our center.
In terms of the population of your fellows, they are women, but they also represent other forms of diversity as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever envision that these women will be all in leadership roles in academia, or do you think that they're also looking to the industries that they may have come through as well?
Well, it's interesting. People move back and forth between the industry and the academic world a lot today. A lot of the, and I call them the young academics we've had, are people who had careers in the industry first, then went back and got their PhDs, and they're now teaching. So they're actually starting out in the academic world. So they're assistant professors looking toward tenure and promotion, but they've already done the industry bit. So it's a diverse group. These cohorts are diverse. It could very well be that they might, go back out into industry. I think we see a lot of this in what we do, that people do move back and forth. So, could be.
Great. Will you talk about being in Miami and how at Florida International you all really were the pioneers in dealing with diversity because of the nature of the demographics here. You've been very active with the Society of Professional Journalists in the Miami area. What are some of the challenges that journalists face in today's media world? Lessons that you can help better teach through this center or through your classes here at FIU?
Well, I think that probably the first thing deals with technology and the fact that we started changing our curriculum. We set up a committee back in 2010, to look at the whole digital area because it was something and look at a digital major because we saw the changes that were coming about. Our students now are just so fully exposed to everything in technology that they can move through all the different industries and feel comfortable in them. It doesn't really matter what they go out and work in. They're going to be moving in, from journalism into digital to online to a magazine, maybe to advertising. I mean, they really do move across the board. And I think we've trained them well enough that they're comfortable enough to be able to survive in all of those industries. So I think that that's something that we've seen a great deal of change in, and particularly for young women, because generally it was thought, well, women don't do as well digitally or with technology as men. It's a story. It's not true. And so I think one of the things that we've seen is that our young female students are doing very well digitally and working with online. We have a lot of our students working with online operations at newspapers. And at, in fact, one of our graduates who started out in the digital area is now the managing editor of the Sun-Sentinel, and she's dealing with all of these people digitally. So they're getting good jobs. They know what they're doing out there. We have a number of students who are working with WLRN, which is public radio here, and they're working with the digital aspect of it and in partnership with the Miami Herald. So there are a lot of them, and they're all females, and they're working within it. So I think that the stereotype that women don't know too much about technology or aren't comfortable with technology has really changed. And hopefully we've done something to make that happen here in South Florida. And I'll tell you kind of a funny story that you mentioned the Society of Professional Journalists. When I came to Miami, which was in the early 70s, SPJ had just decided at that point to let women in to the Society of Professional Journalists, which was a man's fraternal organization, Sigma Delta Chi. And they changed their name and decided they would let women in. And we had the Greater Miami Professional Chapter here in town. And I was very excited. I came from New Jersey. I was a member of the pro chapter there, which was a statewide chapter. So it was, you know, you had to go pretty far to attend its meetings. Well, here we had a chapter right here in Miami, and I was excited about being involved with it. And so I became involved with the chapter. And it wasn't very big, though, and I thought this was very strange because with a population like South Florida, with so much journalism going on here, and really good journalism, we should have had a really big chapter. So somehow I got elected president of the chapter, first woman president of the chapter. So I decided to go and meet with some of the former presidents of the chapter. Now, the chapter at that time was about 25 years old, so it was not a relatively new chapter. It had been here for quite a while. It was formed in the late 40s, early 50s. So I went and met with several of the chapter former presidents, and one of them, a gentleman who worked on one of the newspapers here, said to me, you know, Society of Professional Journalists really was ruined when they allowed women in. Move. Just, okay. Yeah, there has to be motion in the room where the light goes out. So anyway, this gentleman said that it was the worst thing that ever happened to the society because they used to like to sit around at the old Columbus Hotel, which was an old hotel in downtown Miami, and smoke their cigars and talk about journalism and all different kinds of things about journalism. But they couldn't do that anymore now that women could become members. And I have to admit, I was rather aghast at that point in time. And I thought, this is going to take a lot to build this chapter back up. But we did. And we had several women presidents after that and ever since. So we can see that journalism definitely has changed, and particularly has changed here in South Florida, that's for sure.
And just as a footnote, I know that you put the same passion into your work with SPJ that you did with so many of your organizations, and you actually are a Wells Key holder for the Society of Professional Journalists, which is the highest accolade that you could receive from your colleagues with that. So
I was very honored by that, and I was only the second woman to get the Wells Key in the 77-year history at that point of the Wells Key. There were 75 men and there were 2 women at that point in time when I got my Wells Key. So I was thrilled. I was very surprised, I have to admit. I was very surprised.
That's wonderful. As you look around today at what is going on in the media and what is going on in society, what would this world be like without an emphasis on diversity? Because we see so much happening domestically and internationally, and yet we're always teaching our students, we're trying to expand their version of the world. If we didn't have this emphasis, what do you think would happen?
Oh, I think we all have to do our part to make sure that we are representative of the population. 51% of the population is female in the United States. And in other countries, you know, I don't think we're very different from other countries. The populations are pretty even. And yet, you know, in our country alone, I just saw something recent where it said that only 14% of all of the positions on boards of directors and CEOs in business are women. So even in the world of you know, business as a whole, women are still a minority. And then when you break that down by women of color, they're even fewer. And for our population here, with Latinas, it's the lowest, even lower than African American women in percentages of women in leadership positions in communication. And so I think what we have to do is we have to look at the fact that we are a diverse population, and diversity really makes all of our lives better. It's more interesting. We are more representative of the population, and I think the communications a business, because it is a business, needs to be the same way and representative. How can you tell the story of a population if you don't have people who are represented in that population helping to tell that story? So I think it needs to be even, and we need to keep talking about it. And we need to say, look, women are more than half of the population, so women need to be represented, on boards of corporations and in the leadership in the newsroom and as news directors and executive news producers and, editors of papers and magazines and, across the spectrum of what we do, women need to be represented just as much as men are. Needs to be equality.
When people talk about Lillian Kopenhaver and her contributions to AEJMC and to journalism and mass communication education, what do you hope they talk about? What do you hope they think about the leadership that you've provided?
That's a tough one. Wow. I don't know. I hope that they think that I helped a little bit with regard to having some kind of a vision. When I became president of the organization, one of the things I also wanted to do was to involve the professionals from the communications industries with the academics. We always need to talk to one another. There needs to be a conversation. You hear too frequently from professionals in the business, we don't need to have them get journalism degrees. Well, yes, they should have journalism degrees. They need to understand the foundations of journalism in order to produce better journalism. So what I tried to do was to bring together professionals and academics more and more at our conventions and at our meetings and at what we did. I'm still working to do that today because I still do a lot of programming with the Council of Affiliates. I'm one of the representatives on that, and a lot of the things that we put together, we try to bring the professionals in. I mentioned earlier about this panel discussion that we're going to do at the 2016 convention about women, equity, and equality, and we are bringing in professionals who are working, women who are working in the industries to talk about women in the industry, along with the results of the survey, to give the academics information that will help them teach young women in the classroom, that they will know better what's happening in industry and how they can better prepare their students to go out there and become that next generation of leaders, the next generation of journalists. So I think that I would hope that I would be remembered for trying to diversify on a lot of different ways, professionals and academics, women, diversity in general, that maybe I helped things along a little bit.